So more than 1,500 motorists were arrested for drunk driving. This is according to the 2021 festive season road safety statistics released by Transport Minister Fikile Mbalula yesterday. Mbalula has said human error contributed to 79% of fatal crashes on South Africa's roads. For more on the dangers of drunk driving, we're joined by Caro Smit, Director and Founder of South Africans Against Drunk Driving. Caro, thank you for availing yourself this afternoon. That each year the statistics paint an alarming picture tells us what about the messages or messaging and it filtrating to the ground level?
Okay, so Dudu, the messaging is that one can get away with drinking then driving in South Africa because just too few tests are taking place. I know people are saying now with COVID they cannot test people, but you know, if one has a mask on, there are new breathalyzers from alcoholbreathalyzers.co that can test anyone. And so they should be doing like 13 million tests because there are 13 million people on our roads. So getting only 1,586 is, I think, an exceptionally low number. I think there's not enough testing. And then the other thing that happens is that, we talk about, the ministers talk about, please don't drink and drive. What they're not doing is saying things like, if you had a big party last night, don't drink, don't drive, because you could still be over the legal limit. Or if you had alcohol at lunchtime, that one should test oneself with the breathalyzer before you drive. So those are some of the things. And then the other thing, of those 1,586, if we have a 5% conviction rate, which is what we have got in South Africa at the moment, it means that less than 80 of those people will actually be found guilty of driving under the influence. So people are saying, well, it's not such a big deal. I can get away with it. I've never killed anyone before. I'm sure I'm okay. Meanwhile, drinking and driving is exceptionally dangerous. And that's why it's called drink driving now, not drunk driving, because any alcohol affects your driving skills.
So testing is one element. You touch on the fact that people can drink and say, well, I've never killed anybody and I'm sober enough to drive. What about police visibility? I ask you in a sense of when you are out, people know exactly where the roadblocks are or are not. People know exactly when the police will be out during the festive season because it's time to be seen. Is there something to be said about that?
Certainly. The other thing is when people say I'm sober enough to drive, that also is a misconception. If you look at the person who had the highest breath alcohol level, it was 2.43 milligrams. So basically that means 24 units, which meant that person would have taken 24 hours to be sober. Now, if you look at any charts, there are all these different charts. They say at 2 milligrams, you should actually be dead. It's a bit difficult for one to see that, but we've got these charts. You should be dead when you're at 1.6 but a lot of people who are seasoned drinkers, they are practice drinkers, they have got alcohol tolerance, so they don't feel drunk. They think they're okay for driving. Meanwhile, they're very, very dangerous on the road. So that's the one thing. The other thing is, do our police have breathalyzers in their vehicles? No, they don't. Do the police on the whole see drinking than driving as the serious crime it is? Unfortunately not. We have many instances of where people have been in quite serious crashes where there are a lot of injuries, and the victims have asked the police to please breathalyze the other driver, and the police say, well, no one's died, so therefore I'm not going to take blood or breathalyze them. So it's a matter of a lot of things. So visibility is not good enough. We've got to have people, when they're visible, they must then stop people. They must test. They must test for alcohol. They must test for seatbelts. They must test for worn tires, roadworthiness, absolutely everything. So visibility in itself is not good enough. But even though visibility does make a little bit of a difference, we have got too few traffic officers on our roads. We need double, if not treble, the number. And there's no reason why we cannot afford this, because last year, RTMC had over 240 million, I think it was, that they hadn't used. So that money that had been allocated for them should have been used to perhaps buy the breathalyzers, to put in the police vans and the traffic officers, and each traffic officer's car, to train more traffic officers, and also to do the training to the traffic officer and the police about how vital it is to do the paperwork correctly. So if someone is tested for alcohol, that stands up in court. Because why a lot of people get away with it is that the paperwork is not done correctly. There's maybe one form that's not signed, or something is signed in the wrong place, or some, so the people who've got the money hire these very clever advocates, the lawyers who make a lot of money, and these advocates tend to get the drinkers and drivers off. We have a case in Cape Town now. A young skateboarder was killed by a man who had 2 previous drink driving convictions. We know that apparently he's had many other times that he was caught for drinking and driving but got off those, and then he has now killed a child. And so, it's just something that should not happen. Drinking and driving is not an accident. It's a choice, and it is a serious, serious crime.
Testing is one aspect you point out. Police visibility is another aspect that you point out. Driver responsibility, and each and every single one of us taking responsibility of our lives and understanding that just like COVID, you have to take care of the next person. Your acts affect the next person.
Yes, that's so true. But, unfortunately, so many people in our country do not follow laws, and they only do things when they are forced to. So the whole thing is people carry on doing certain behaviors if they can get away with it. So they only change their behaviors when they are scared of the legal and the financial consequences of their actions. So, for example, people are not buckling up in the back of vehicles, even though it is the law, because very seldom are they being stopped and fined for not buckling up. The same as people are drinking and driving because your chance of a conviction is so low, or going through a red robot. So the whole thing is we have to force people to change their behavior by really enforcing the laws. And people say, isn't this a nanny state? And what I say is, what about all the people who do not drink and drive, who do buckle up, and yet who get killed by those few irresponsible people? What about the rights of those 1,685 people who died? What about their rights? They have been infringed on by other people. And the other thing, Dudu, is that what we don't take in account in South Africa, we don't talk about it enough, is the number of injured people in road crashes in South Africa. The people who are in wheelchairs, the people who are paralyzed, the fact that if your breadwinner dies, the family is pushed into poverty. If you are paralyzed and your family have to look after you, the family are often pushed into poverty or further into poverty. So it's something that shouldn't be handled only by the Department of Transport. We should be involving the police, because we need the police to do more testing and to follow up properly. We need Department of Justice to be involved, because the convictions, we need harsher convictions. So of those 80 people who will get the convictions, I bet none of them will have their licenses suspended, which should happen automatically. And people say, but then I can't work. 85% of South Africans travel by taxis and by public transport. So those few could travel by public transport. So there is no excuse for actually not removing licenses. And the other thing, if someone kills, it should be an automatic prison sentence. So those are all the things that need to be done. Department of Health, we need Department of Health to come on board with road safety because of all the cost to the hospitals, to the doctors and the trauma and the enormous cost to the fiscus. We need Department of Social Development because they've got to pay for the grants and they've also got to pay for disability grants and the grants for the children who are left without parents, etc., etc. It's an enormous thing that we need to involve our whole government, and people need to be responsible. But people only become responsible like they are in Australia when they are forced to do it.
Caro Smit is the director and founder of South Africans Against Drunk or Drink Driving. Thank you for availing yourself this afternoon.